pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to some more HJN Super Foam Flying. And so, for today, we're going to take ourselves a little trip over to Doomland's 2169 and talk a little bit about the debut blaster that started it all. The Lawbringer. And so, this is basically what started it all when it comes to Doomlands and when it comes to the post-apocalyptic cliche that Hasbro was able to jump on at the time this particular bandwagon was at its height. There's been a lot of franchises that have this sort of post-apocalyptic sort of scenario. A cliche that is probably never gonna die. Of course, I also remember the fact that I had my own film project called 3334, in which it was set 20 years later in the years 2033 and 2034. And it's basically my own sort of post-apocalyptic thing, very akin to that of Blade Runner or various other sorts of post-apocalyptic, futuristic sort of scenarios that people have been able to make in film, television, book, video game, or otherwise. But the Lawbringer does bring a whole different perspective to the meaning of post-apocalyptic warfare. And that's simply because the story revolving around a giant meteor causing a near extinction level event to humanity, nearly wiping everybody and everything out of existence, was able to start a whole new storyline that would bring about a huge opportunity for a new kind of marketing strategy that Hasbro would in fact inhibit. And that, of course, was where Doomland's 2169 was brought onto the world. Or it's just simply called Doomlands. But in any case, this logo you'd see up here was basically a thing between 2015 and 2018, where they basically died off after creating their last blaster called the Holdout. But in 2019 and onwards, even up until today, you can actually find a huge selection of Doomland's blasters out there. And that's because in 2019 was where they liquidated a lot of assets revolving Doomland's blasters that have gone unsold. And so when they were able to search through their warehouses and find out that there were lots of Doomland's blasters still around in their inventory, they basically cleaned those places up. And since then, we've been seeing a lot of Doomland's blasters appearing all over the shelves. And so, if that doesn't sound exciting enough, then well, I don't know what is. But the Lawbringer does, in fact, have a bit of a different take on a lot of things when considering blasters out there that take on the cliche that we know as post-apocalypse. The kind of standpoint that humanity might bring upon, especially with the way that most things have been happening these days. It feels a lot more relevant now than it did back then, but you know what? It's not necessarily about the storyline that I'm concerned about, but about the blaster. And I ought to say, this is a good blaster. That's all I got to say about that. I feel like I'm just jumping to conclusions here, but in any serious matter, the way that you prime the blaster to rotate the barrel as well is you pull it back on the hammer. And we've seen a good amount of blasters out there with hammer action. If you remember when I did a review on blasters like the Harpy, Splatter, Opposer, Persuader, and some others, even the Negotiator had itself some hammer action to it. And it does seem that the Doomland's blasters usually take on this particular priming method, which is simply pulling back on a hammer to prime the blaster, but to also give away a little secret that you could simply hold down the trigger and fire it like a cowboy with a 6-shooter. Yeah, it's pretty much just dependent on how you might be able to work with it. But I guess the next big thing about this is the fact that it includes dart storage right here in the rear. And because this cylinder is capable of holding a rather good amount of darts, this one can hold a grand total of 12 darts. And so I'm going to fill this thing all the way up to the top and then pretty much just fire through all of them. And so with that in mind, just pretty much enjoy me reloading this blaster pretty much with ease, because this is probably one of the smoothest sorts of reloading actions that I might have been able to see when it comes to cylinder-based blasters. And I've specifically talked about a lot of other blasters that have cylinders in them, not just including many of the other Doomland's blasters in the lineup, like the Negotiator, but of course, with other cylinder blasters, I do tend to feel a little different about some of them, specifically because of this sort of functionality that is kind of important, but as you can basically see, I got no trouble at all with handling a Lawbringer in my hands like so. And I feel like I am actually getting really good at firing it 6-shooter style by simply firing it like that. And so, I guess that pretty much just concludes that whole entire thing. Although there might be a couple other things I have to mention, so let's go ahead and bring this back. The trademark sort of clear plastic side, which allows you to see how the mechanism works, it's certainly another quirk that the Doomland series is well known for. Pretty much all the blasters in the line have this particular piece of transparent plastic that allows you to see the inside of the blaster and how the blaster itself works based on internal construction. Let's also not forget about these black sort of foregrips that you see that are mostly sideways. A couple tack rails on top, and well, as I mentioned before, there's the dart storage in the back right here, the stock. Plenty of sling adapter points, and pretty much anything else could be explanatory. Self-explanatory by any means. And so with that in mind, that just pretty much concludes my take on the Lawbringer itself. It's a good blaster. It started the Doomland series off, and it did a good number of things out there that most other blasters could not at the time in 2015. But I'm not necessarily going to point out that it actually is the best blaster when it comes to cylinders, hammers, dart storage in the stock or elsewhere, or otherwise. But yet it is still usable by any means, so definitely go pick one up at any point in time, as I was able to get mine on the cheap from ebay.com. And so with that in mind, that just is pretty much all I have to say about that. And if you want to see more of that on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.